It almost seems prophetic. Isolation and the distant longing for an imagined future. A mirage. A tentative glimpse of divergent paths to alternative possible futures and states of being. As we struggle in both the turbulence and wake of COVID lockdowns, our notions of isolation, state and future have shifted. They no longer have the exact same meanings to us as they did in our 21st century pre-pandemic era. They are all framed differently. When the state of print was first initiated, it was also conceived of as a way of reframing. For our purposes, we wanted to reframe the state through the lens of print, working on the premise that the mechanisms of state have all been printed. Whilst at a residency at the Tyrone Guthrie Centre, we set about printing the building blocks of the state in the form of cardboard boxes. As the days passed, one of these early boxes was then transformed into a helmet, a three-dimensional, wearable version of the image that we had initially screen printed upon it. The image was one that had intrigued me for some time, of Hugo Gernsback, pioneer of early 20th century American magazine pulp science fiction, sitting at a desk wearing the isolation helmet that he had designed almost 100 years ago in 1925, and in the wake of our last global pandemic. The motivations that he stated as a basis for the design, as a way to block out distractions so as to focus the mind and concentrate on the work at hand, differ somewhat from what we saw in the image. We saw a vision of a suggested different perception of the state of things. Maybe it wasn't just the helmet. I remember reading a short story by William Gibson titled The Gernsback Continuum. The Gernsback of the title alludes to the same Hugo Gernsback. In this short story, a photographer, the narrator, is commissioned to illustrate a coffee table book about North American architecture of the 1930s, to be published under the suggestive title The Airstream Futuropolis, The Tomorrow That Never Was. Excavating the architecture of the so-called American streamlined modern, full of chrome surfaces and buildings that might float, the narrator is haunted by what he calls the semiotic ghost, hallucinations of unrealised futures. Like the narrator in Gibson's story, a phrase comes back to haunt me. It is one I would see regularly as I passed beneath it, painted on the side of an old viaduct railway bridge in Leeds sometime in the 1970s. The age of leisure is nigh. It hung there in the air, suggesting something that I was not clear about at the time. Its promise enticed me, however. In hindsight, it conjured an image of a possible future, one that never materialised, the tomorrow that never was. On reflection, it is clear that the promise of the electronic and digital era has not delivered the age of leisure that it was supposed to herald, and in many ways quite the opposite. The phrase, like the television series of that time, Tomorrow's World, did, however, provide a fleeting glimpse of alternative possibilities and ways to imagine the future that we want to build. In the final frames of the recent BBC TV series, Can't Get You Out of My Head, Adam Curtis leaves us with another glimpse hanging. A quote from anthropologist and activist David Graeber. The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something we make, and could just as easily make differently.
The handling of the flag guidelines. It declares in the State of Print ritualistic booklet that the flag should not touch the ground when it's been hoisted or lowered, that it should be replaced when it becomes ragged or frayed, it should not be draped on printing presses, acid baths, screen beds or modes of transport, it should not be carried flat except when used over a coffin of one of the state members. The colour of the flag, mustard, sky blue, grey blue and red, encompasses a much wider frame of referencing and meaning while still retaining very important historical and political associations for the colour palette of the cardboard boxes. The first visual representation of the state of print flag was in Scotland at the recording of our national anthem. In general, the attitude to our flag is a mixture of pride and detachment. The importance of showing respect for the flag is a constant theme throughout the history of the state. The SOP government has chosen not to insist on compulsory recommendations in relation to the flying of the flag, but careful attention and full respect from those who have the honour that is due to receiving the flag.
When we began building the state of print, we mused on displays that outwardly or visually professed statehood. Intrigued by the grandiose and opulence of the ceremonial aspects of state, we were drawn to the medal as an emblem that encapsulates the memorial, commemorative and miraculous. Medals are synonymous with notions of the heroic and valiant, memorialising a point in time. However, they are also used as symbols of triumphalism and propaganda. Our medals also capture a point in time, attempt to subvert and play with the traditional medallic values. They are designed to question, while at the same time are associated with the developing mythology around our state. The State of Print ribbon rosette was commissioned by the Minister of Words. It adheres to a strict colour coding, the official colours of the state, red, yellow and blue. The rosette is only worn by ministers of the state at opening ceremonies of manifestations of the state. Its presence is very obvious, pompous and self-aggrandizing. In fact, one precious rosette went missing after a state reception following the opening of the Santander Embassy. It later resurfaced in a drinking den and had been defaced to try and hide its provenance. The medal has never been repatriated. Our ceremonial medals are our highest and most prestigious decoration and are awarded to citizens who are willing to embrace the ridiculous and the sublime. These medals have been cast from the non-precious metal of copper. The observer of the medal is inscribed with images and text celebrating the history of the state. The medal's ribbons are tailored from old etching blankets imbued with the toil and sweat of 1,000 printmakers. Other elements of our regalia are our badges, silk screened with brightly coloured ink. Using familiar medallic insignia, they are furnished with words such as state, citizen, SOP, questioning ideas of identity and belonging. Both these and our button badges are highly sought after keepsakes. They are only awarded to visitors who cross our border.